Welcome to this episode of Washington Policy on the Go. My name is David Bose. I'm the Communications Director for Washington Policy Center. And this is the show where we interview our center directors and, on very rare occasions, other special guests that might tie into our mission of promoting freedom and free markets and recognizing the prosperity that comes from that, the unleashing of human potential. And sometimes of just truth finding. So we'll talk about those things. Got a special interview today that we'll play. We've never done that before. During the annual dinner events, I was able to catch up with Bremerton's coach Joe Kennedy, whose case regarding his prayer after football games went all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States, which ultimately ruled in his favor. He was kind enough to do the invocation for our annual dinner event, and I was able to talk with him and interview him about that case. So I'll be playing that interview coming up. But first, we're joined, as you can see, by Mark Harmsworth, our Center for Small Business Director. Mark has written a couple of blogs recently, one about the upcoming legislative session, which is the preamble. It's like in a tsunami when the water kind of pulls out and you see the signs of what's to come. That's what Mark's blog is about there, and also about a more surprising thing, which is California doing something right, which is kind of a shocking headline unto itself. So, Mark, let's start with California. It's not every day that somebody says, you know what we should do? We should imitate California. Why?
Thanks for having me on today, Dave. First of all, California, who does a lot of really, really dumb stuff, just because of their political makeup, actually has realized, I think, at this point that a lot of the decisions they've been making over the last few years, particularly around housing, is what this is focused on, are not working. And we've seen all the pictures of downtown San Francisco. It mirrors our own Seattle in many ways. And then just creating enough housing for everybody. We've got the same problem here. What California has done over the last few years, they've been passing some bills. And their Governor Newsom, has signed, I think it's either 53 or 56 bills in the last year or so to help with housing. And two of them really jumped out at me, which I think that we could follow the lead of California. And I can't believe I just said that. But there are some things there that we could do. So the first is the California bill, Senate Bill 4. And what Senate Bill 4 does is allows, now I'll caveat all of this by saying there's no reason why the state government couldn't just allow people to do this in the first place. But having said that, let's just talk about these two bills too. So Senate Bill 4, the California bill, allows a religious organization to have homes built on their property. So you can imagine a church or some other nonprofit that has a lot of land, and they maybe want to build some affordable housing on there. So as long as they build what the government classifies as affordable housing, and that's where I get a little hung up on that at that point, but okay, we'll still work within that criteria. They can streamline some of the permitting process, and they can avoid a lot of the unnecessary reviews by, in this case, the California Ecology Department, or the equivalent of our ecology department, and they can reduce the cost to building those homes in the first place, and they can house those people. So even if they build like a small apartment complex, they can build a manager apartment that does not need to be low income or low, affordable housing, but the rest of them do. So the state's allowed to do that. Not a bad idea, because it does increase the availability of affordable housing, and it also encourages these religious organizations that may have a lot of land around their primary building to build these homes. And I chatted with some representatives over at BIAW, and they like the ideas, the Building Industry Association of Washington, because those organizations are typically trying to help those that are trying to get their foot on the property ladder. They may be lower income people, and so this seems like a good fit. So Senate Bill 4 from California is the first one. The second one is Senate Bill 423.
Can we pause on that first,
You
Mark?
bet.
Because the first thing I thought of was, well, there was a couple of things going through my head there. One was, if you have unnecessary permitting processes, and you recognize that and you say to yourself, okay, you know what, we can make this easier and we'll reduce the cost of housing by getting rid of some of this stuff. Doesn't it strike you as odd that they wouldn't say, you know what, we could actually make all housing more affordable if we just did this across the board and we just revisited all of these things to see, have we piled on a bunch of unnecessary regulations and paperwork, and are we just artificially jacking up the price of houses all over the place? I would think that recognizing, aha, we're making housing less affordable by doing this, and we could actually impact affordable housing by streamlining under these certain circumstances, might awaken them to the idea that they could do it, and make housing more affordable just everywhere, all the time, for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not talking about the state of common sense. We're talking about the state of California here.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right, Dave. They could just say across the board, and I mentioned this in the blog we just put up. They could just say across the board, look, we're just going to remove these restrictions, and everyone has the opportunity. However, they haven't, and at least they're trying to do something here. They're trying to give a little bit of movement. I'll take that. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll take as much as I can get.
It's a baby. I'm willing to take the salami tactics, slice by slice. Let's move toward a common sense direction, at least a little bit at a time. But the other thing too is, I think for some people, they might hear, hey, we're going to streamline some permitting and we're going to reduce costs that way. They might think, well, how much can you really save by reducing permitting costs? I mean, that can't be that much. Just for some perspective, remind people about the potential total impact of items like this.
It could be over $100,000 on the median price home. So you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars. And I am personally trying to build a house right now, and my permitting costs are in the tens of thousands of dollars, and I don't even have a stick out of the ground yet. So it's that's just my water permitting and my septic and all the electrical and all the rest of that kind of stuff that goes with it. So building a house, for a developer, when they're building a lot of houses in one place, obviously there's some economies of scale there, but they're still paying tens of thousands of dollars, if not over $100,000, depending on the price of the house. And they're not just going to eat that cost. They pass that on to the consumer, in this case, the home buyer, and the home buyer ends up putting that on a mortgage, which makes it even worse because now they're paying, well, nowadays 8% on a 30-year loan on that money that was used to pay for these permits and that kind of stuff. So ecology is particularly egregious around this, where they often will go through multiple reviews from ecology perspective. So you do a review at the beginning, a review halfway through. And some of the bills in Olympia addressed that last year by saying, look, we just don't need that second review. If you've done it once, we're good to go. We don't need to do it again. So there's a bunch of things like this that we could be doing. California is obviously trying this with this bill. We've got some other bills that are coming through. Senate Bill 5792, which is Senator Padden's bill, reclassifies some of the multimodal stuff that's here in Washington, and that reduces, particularly around that the double review that I mentioned just a second ago. It's that kind of stuff that can reduce the amount in the permit costs, because people don't realize that up to 25% of their home, sometimes 25% of the home, is permits, which is, it's insane that it costs that much.
It is crazy. Now, before we forget, I know you had a second California bill you wanted to mention. Sorry for I put you on a detour there. So what's the second California bill?
That's right. You're going to have to pay me more now to talk about this bill because it got delayed. Senate Bill 423 basically is it's to do with the owner's permitting. We sort of touched on this already. But if a municipality hasn't met its affordable housing goals, then a developer gets some of their permits waived, and they can come in and build some affordable housing. So it's connected with this permitting thing again, and that reduces the price. So California has passed, similar to what we've done with the Growth Management Act, they've passed a statute that says a municipality must support this much of this type of housing. And if they're not hitting those goals, then a developer can come and say, okay, you're not hitting your goals. We can now do this without certain levels of permitting to speed this along. So that's not a bad idea as well. There's a couple of caveats in there because again, kind of like SB 4, the state can come in and say, okay, we're going to apply certain goals and things around the type and the cost, which really puts a developer in a box, which again will drive up the cost. And I think you'll see if states continue to do this, you'll see, and there was, you'll see stuff around like Seattle. You're seeing housing starts come down a little bit there, because it's so expensive to build, and plus folks aren't moving to Seattle right now anyway. So,
well, that brings us to a question that's there right now in the chat. I encourage people to use the Q&A box when possible, but I caught this one luckily. Cynthia's asking, hey, housing starts are down in Seattle. What do you attribute this to?
I just think folks don't want to move to Seattle right now. It's expensive. The rates are high, and not just regionally. I mean, if you're moving to Washington State, and you've seen some of the crime that's going on in Seattle, and they've started to make some strides to fix it. But I personally wouldn't want to buy a home in the downtown area right now because I don't think it's safe. And it's the same with the businesses down there. The businesses trying to operate, and then you've still got homeless on the street. You've still got needles. You've still got poop and the rest of the stuff that's going on down there. And it's not a safe place. I was down there just a few weeks ago on 2nd and James by the Pike Tower, and there are homeless people everywhere, all over the streets. They're just lying down, they're sleeping. The cops are going around in pairs. I'm sure they're nervous about what's going on down there. So why would you want to buy a house down there? So why would you want to build a house down there when you could build a house in one of the more suburban areas with a relatively short commute? You can get up into the shoreline area or south of the city, SoDo, and down towards SeaTac, and still get into town in a reasonable amount of time. That's where I'd be building if I was a builder, because I know I'm away from the kind of the core of those issues. And I think that's what's driving it specifically for Seattle.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a old colleague of mine on the left saying that the concerns about Seattle are overblown. It's safe. He goes down there all the time. And it was just a strange thing because I wondered, what world do you live in? I go down there and I'm just astonished at how decrepit and how much decay is evident, and the people that are left on the streets to do whatever they want to do. It's unfair to them, and it's unfair to everybody around them. And then I can't imagine it being a more enjoyable Christmas experience than, say, Holiday Lane in Bellevue, right? Right.
Well, Bellevue's got it right. They just don't tolerate it.
You can, well, yeah, exactly. And the public spaces, your business, it's tough enough downtown as it is. And you're supposed to go through a gauntlet of people that have, severe addiction problems, which leads to criminality and unpredictability of behavior. So, it's a weird thing where there's almost a social pressure on the left to try to say, well, you shouldn't be afraid, you shouldn't do this, it could be anything. And yet every time you read of an encampment removal or something like that, there's all kinds of illegal stuff that they find and dangerous materials and other things. So yeah, Seattle's got its challenges, and not to mention interest rates are high. So you could probably build more house somewhere else. So why not? That's tough.
Come to Mill Creek. It's wonderful.
There we go. Quick comment from Eric. Any comment on governor's proposal to spend $1 billion on climate-related projects? Well, he's always willing to spend a lot of other people's money on climate-related projects, but he doesn't actually accomplish that much, as Todd Myers has pointed out when he tries that. Heidi's asking, I'm down in Clark County, and they're working on implementing 1181. It requires a bunch of climate transportation density stuff. Where I am going is from rural to high density, so there's impact fees for the schools, plus land use permitting. How is Washington looking at climate high growth that requires and these infrastructure requirements? Do you have any insight on that?
I don't off the top of my head. I think, as you mentioned, there's been a bunch of goals that the state has completely missed and has now removed its website with the goals where they're trying to hit. So there's that. But the principle of what you said, it was Heidi. Hi, Heidi.
Yeah.
Heidi is talking about there is that they're applying these impact fees based on where you're living. Again, those are the fees that some of the stuff is talking about, because it just drives, ultimately, those fees are passed on to the consumer of the homes. And the state would like you to believe that they're going to have this fantastic public transportation system, that you're going to be able to catch a train from Everett to SeaTac and then ultimately down into Tacoma and all these different places. But what we've seen is that the cost of running that is approximately $180, $190 per person that we're subsidizing per ticket. So it's not cost effective. And that cost is being passed on to, if you live in the Sound Transit regional transit area, your car tabs are going up, and your property taxes and the sales taxes, all the rest of the stuff's going up, which increases the cost of your housing and the rest of it even more. For a car that has tabs of around $300 for the Sound Transit area, that drives 12,000 miles a year, which is the average, that gets 25 miles to the gallon, which is the average, you're paying 80 cents a gallon on top of what you see at the pump to Sound Transit. And that's a hidden tax. You just happen to pay it once a year with your car tabs. But that's the sort of cost that's being passed on. And then you're seeing property taxes go up significantly. Mine went up significantly this year in my home in Mill Creek. And a lot of the changes that are going on at the state all gets passed on in increased costs at the homeowner's level. And even if you're renting, you're paying it because your rent's going to go up as a result of that as well. So these regional impact fees that they're putting on there, it's the same thing. It's just going to drive up the cost of your homes wherever you're at.
Do you you had a blog about the 2024 legislative session and the madness starting already. I described it like the tsunami wave, where there's the pullback of water before something rushes forward. Why the I don't know if it was a purposeful nod toward the mouth of madness, or the Lovecraftian madness, but what's your observation so far of the rumblings pre-legislative session?
Well, I think of it more like the Godzilla's Gansami and tsunami, when he comes out of the water at the beginning there, because,
Yeah.
at least there's some hope that we can defeat him. So one of the bills that they dropped early, and for those that don't know, there's this process called pre-file, where legislators get to unleash their ideas on the unsuspecting public ahead of session, and then to start the debate, and particularly in a short session, which we're in this year. It's a 60-day session starting in January. Often this will happen a lot because there's a lot to get through, and 60 days is not, even at the speed of government, is not very long. So Senate Bill 5793 is a bill that expands sick leave to include some new categories. And often what you'll see with legislators is they'll pass a bill a few years earlier. They do it in several phases, which creates a new entitlement. And then what they do is they expand the entitlement by redefining what's included. And this is what this bill is doing. So as a result of the changes in this bill, you will be able to claim a sick day if your school is closed for snow. So if your school shuts down, or the governor says, hey, emergency, the schools in Whatcom County are closed because of a snow day, you can now take a sick leave. And so the employer is now literally footing the bill for you staying home because of your kids. Additionally, if you have somebody living in your home and they're sick, and you decide, I'm just going to stay home and take care of them, doesn't matter who they are, then you can claim that as a sick day now too. So now you're in a situation where you're able to take sick days, not for being sick, but just staying home. And you know where this is going to go. We're going to end up with an additional 5 days of vacation if the governor declares an emergency for COVID-20 or whatever the next variant could be. Then you're going to see employers having to foot the bill for those days that the government says you should stay home. And that's a real problem, because that will drive up the cost of products and services, because that will get passed on to customers, or it will suppress wages, or an employer that suddenly has to cover an extra 40 hours a year of effectively paid vacation because the employee's not sick. And there's no provision in there for being able to work at home remote either. Is now footing the bill for that. So you're going to see a lot of the same thing with a lot of these unfounded mandates, the paid family leave. You're going to see a lot of this stuff go through.
I'm just picturing, you're home working, and then it's snowy outside, so you can't drive, then technically you could call it snow
Yeah,
day,
call
you
it
know,
a snow snick day or something. I don't
and
know.
think of how often in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, look, I like the fact that employers have flexibility. What I don't like is
Yeah,
mandates, right?
yeah,
So, just picture how many times we've had snowpocalypse coverage, where, we've got 2 feet coming. It's gonna be hell out there, and
right.
we get a dusting of a quarter of an inch, and all hell breaks loose in the Pacific Northwest.
And
And
most employees they're gonna try to work at home and do the right thing and not
right,
take the
right.
day off, right? But there's a segment of the population will just go, well, touchdown, it's snow day. It looks like it might snow. I'll just take today as a sick day.
Yeah, there's something that happens to people when something becomes an entitlement, where you're telling people you have the right to do this, you have the right to demand, instead of, something where you call your employer and say, "Hey, look, you know what, the kids are home today. I've got a tough spot," and people have the ability to treat people differently based on their circumstances. And
Yeah,
most people recognize, that makes sense.
yeah,
You know,
do what you can and we'll work it out. No big
yeah,
deal. But then when the state comes in and says thou shalt take a sick day,
yeah.
it's not mandatory, obviously, but it's going to happen, and so it drives up the costs again. Another unfunded government mandate, and that's why the madness is starting. So if you're interested, the Washington State site has just search for Washington State pre-filed bills. Grab your cup of coffee and a little bit of scotch and enjoy the madness that's approaching us in January.
I'm picturing a sequel to, I don't know if you're familiar with the kids' book Snowy Day, where you got that nice little kid in his red outfit going around the neighborhood in the middle of, I think it's New York or Chicago or something, and he's just busy as a kid would be in the snow. And I'm picturing him now getting older, trying to start a business, and he's just
Right.
stuck with the snow days here. It's a totally different circumstance. Anyway, good stuff, Mark. Appreciate you coming on
You bet.
and sharing with us. Thank you. All right, now I'm going to share my screen because I did an interview with Coach Joe Kennedy, who did the invocation for us at our annual dinner event in Bellevue. And I thought while I had him available, I started asking him questions about his Supreme Court case. He's made history here and regarding his case for free speech and First Amendment rights. And I thought that Washington Policy Center members and fans would enjoy hearing his perspective on his case and how it came about, the things that he learned from it, and his own experiences. It's a little bit raw, but I think it'll be okay for you. There's a couple of my green hands at editing there, because we had, there's traffic going by and things like that. So if you see a glitch, that's what it is. I'm not cutting off an answer or anything. I'm actually just stopping you from hearing a giant truck going by or something like that. But anyway, Coach Joe Kennedy was gracious enough to give us some time to talk about his experience, and I want to be able to share that with you. So I'm going to hit share screen here, and we're going to go to the video, I'm hoping. Let's see here. All right. Now we should be good to go.
This all first started, actually, everything came from a compliment. Somebody saw what we were doing on the football field. They came to one of our games and they saw what we were doing and called the principal and said, "What you're doing is awesome." So, of course, they had to start an investigation, and it kind of led us down the wrong road. Their lawyers got involved, and they ended up saying, just, "Hey, stop praying with your kids, with the team." I was perfectly all right with that. It was, unfortunate, but it's their school, their rules. It was only until they told me that I couldn't pray myself, I had a problem with it.
And how did that, was that a step-by-step evolution, or did they kind of start with, hey, you can't pray at all anymore?
Yeah. So it was incremental. They first started with an investigation. Then they gave me a letter of direction on what I could and could not do, which was perfectly fine. They say you could pray as long as it doesn't interfere with your coaching duties. Well, that wasn't a problem. Then they gave me a second letter and said, stop praying with the football team. Then they gave me a third letter and said, oh, but we can still see you praying, so you need to stop praying in public.
And was that, did they want you to stop students from voluntarily praying with you then?
They told, the way the school came about, they wanted me to just stop praying with the students. And the only thing in the school that they have, the school only has one policy, and that is not to encourage nor discourage kids in prayer. And that was fine with me because I wasn't encouraging them or discouraging them. I think that would have been just as bad to tell them that they had to pray. So this was all voluntarily, and they thought if they could just stop me from doing it, then they would remove the public prayer altogether.
And what case here?
The way it came about, my fighting, was when I sat down with my football team and I was telling them, I kept them just in the loop of everything that was going on. And they said, Coach, can't you just give in to them and remain our coach? Well, obviously, there's no way you could just stop there. And I knew at that moment, at that very moment, that this was something I had to do. I would never be able to be a coach. I would never be able to face those kids. I want to be able to face myself as a husband and a father if I knew that I was going to stop doing this because it became uncomfortable to me. I have these kids doing everything. They're in pain. They're working so hard on Friday night, during a game. And now all of a sudden, because this becomes uncomfortable for me, no, that was something I just wouldn't do. Also, the superintendent of our school, he went to the same church as I did. So he knew what was right, but he was unable. He spent 37 years trying to get to that pinnacle of his career, and he wasn't about to give all that up for a prayer after a high school football game. I totally understood that. But so that was one of the other main reasons is there are so many people in America that are afraid of losing their jobs. And I was willing to do that. I was a Marine. I was trained to fight, and fighting is just something that I'm naturally good at, and God called me to be his warrior for this. From the very beginning, I've always told my team to do what is right, even if it's not popular. So this was my opportunity to lead by example. So God, he works in just crazy ways, and he brought these lawyers into this. I wanted nothing to do with lawyers. I didn't want to have any fights. I thought we could have worked this all out just between people talking like normal people would. But their lawyers got involved, and they were the ones that were the driving force in this. So when lawyers got involved, it was not really by my choice, but I had no other place to go. They had legal representation, and I knew my rights as an American and what the First Amendment and the Constitution means. Somewhere they forgot that, and I needed legal help because what am I going to do? I'm a high school football coach. I can't fight a school. I can't fight their attorneys. I needed somebody to represent me, and it was because a friend of a friend that I was coaching with actually was a lawyer who just happened to be at a law conference with First Liberty Institute. So God put all those pieces together, and it started out as a simple phone call between us. I told them my story, and they said, "You've got a really good case here." And that's how it all started. I'd say the most surreal moment was when we were actually ruling on what this meant. It was beyond me. It was so much farther than me. Because the only thing I asked for was to be able to coach football and to pray afterwards. God, in his sense of humor, took this all the way to the Supreme Court, and it changed the trajectory of the entire nation. I had no idea the implications that this was going to be. So when they ruled on it and took away the lemon test, that was a huge thing. I didn't even know what this was. And all of a sudden, this frees up 7,000 cases from the past 50 years. And this allowed God right back into our schools. That was the moment that really just floored me, that God took it that far. Right. And the Supreme Court guy, how do you say his name? Gorsuch? No, anyway, the most amazing thing was the way that the Supreme Court clarified that. They, in their ruling, said that every American has the right, the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion. And those two work in conjunction with each other instead of opposing each other. There was a settlement with the school. The original balance for the attorney fees was $6.9 million. And I didn't want the school to have to pay that much for attorney fees. That's ridiculous. So I just wanted to sit down with them, actually come to the table and negotiate that down. And then we settled down to $1.75 million. Now, I wish I could say, yeah, I'm an instant millionaire, but no, that's not the way it was. Every single nickel went to the lawyers. I didn't see a dime of it, which really sucks. I mean, just a little off the top would have been nice.
A lot of time involved.
Yeah.
And was there an apology from the school district?
There was not an apology from the school district. When we were in negotiations, we thought that we would be able to get that with them. Them just admitting what they did was wrong and that this is what is right now. And that was the hardest thing. They absolutely refused to do any kind of letter. I even went as far as asking them, can we just do a joint thing, saying, hey, this is the end of the case, that we're looking forward to working together, something that was going to bring us together, and they absolutely refused it.
I think I'd let them take the full $6 million attorney fees after that.
Oh, it really was tempting. I was, and then after, gosh, this whole thing has just been so frustrating, because even after they lost, well, the case was ruled in my favor. I don't feel like they lost anything. It was just a weird situation, the way that they had to answer a simple question. Can you pray on the football field after a game? Simple question. So I never looked at this as a battle. I never looked at this as a battle. This was something that only thing I asked is just to be able to be a coach and to pray after a football game. That was a simple thing as far as I was concerned, a 30-second prayer. So the school took it upon themselves as being very adversarial. They wanted to, it was us against them. And these people are my friends. I worked with these people for over a decade. We went to, Christmas parties, Halloween carvings. We did everything together. This is a small community. So the thought of this and splintering and dividing our friendships over something so simple as a prayer, I couldn't wrap my brain around that. And it was frustrating that at the very end, they still, even when I came back, when they had to rehire me, they said that I was nothing but a distraction for the past 8 years. And to me, the Constitution is not just a distraction. It actually means something to me.
2 more questions for you. Yeah, I've done the wrong thing.
There was not a single day that went by that I did not think that I was doing the wrong thing. I questioned this all the way through. And then I kept questioning God, why me? I mean, there's so many other people I think more qualified that can represent you. I'm just a high school football coach from Bremerton. So I was doubting this, especially with my family. I had 2 kids in the high school. My wife worked for the school district. This was a real tough thing. And I lost my whole entire football team and 8 years of battling. It was terrible. I hope nobody has to go through this. I felt that every day. Every day I felt like somebody was praying for me. We got a letter. I would meet somebody. I would get an email, social media. And every time I go and I speak at all these events, when I speak all around the country at events about this whole situation and the First Amendment and our constitutional rights, every single time this is my chance to be able to thank people, because their prayers are the ones that did it. I was just the guy standing there. It was the prayers of the American people and the support of everyone in America that made this happen. That's what turned God into making this. I think the number one question that I've been asked that I really have not been able to answer is, what is next? I have absolutely no idea. I sit here with God every day and say, okay, what's next? Now that the fight is over, I ran the race, we fought the good fight, we ended well, we've remained faithful. What is next? I have no clue under the sun. Every day is something new, and I am just waiting for God to come into my wife and my life together and see what's next for us.
How do your kids feel about you being in the history books?
My kids are like, you're just dad. They don't understand the magnification of this, and I'm just their dad. It's no big deal to them. The coolest thing that my kids thought was when I was on Sports Illustrated, on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and we had a really great interview with ESPN. I think my kids only get their news from those 2 sources. I find it fascinating that God used me to be a footnote in the history books, and people are going to be studying this case for years, and this affected the entire nation. That's way beyond me. Who would ever think something so simple as an outward thanks of prayer would lead down the road like this?
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure meeting you.
Oh, sorry. Kind of a fascinating conversation. Obviously, there's, it's a more religious testimony than we ordinarily offer here on the show, but it's a First Amendment issue and it's a free speech issue. And Coach Kennedy's a local player that managed, to, as he put it, become a footnote in the history books. Brought a case to the Supreme Court of the United States successfully, and change the trajectory of how the federal government and government in general can treat religious people. I'll be posting this. I'll re-edit the interview and I'll post it up on our YouTube channel. That'll be available as a Washington Policy on the Go episode here coming up tomorrow on our YouTube channel if you want to share that and see it again. So I hope you enjoy the interview. Hopefully we'll be able to provide more of that. And don't forget, coming up January 8th, the legislative session starts, which means for Washington Policy on the Go, it's every week. Every Tuesday we'll be here. And hopefully you'll be able to share that news with friends and build up the audience, which usually explodes during the legislative session. So we'll have a lot of people joining us, and we'll probably change the start time to 12:05 or 12:10 or something along those lines, simply because people have got to grab their lunches, and it gives them a little bit more time to just kind of grab their stuff, sit down at their desk, and get ready for the show. So you can see the Kennedy interview as I played it. Again, this episode will be available on the Washington Policy Center's YouTube channel tomorrow. So you can watch for that. And we'll see you in, well, wait a second, I was about to say 2 weeks, but with the Christmas holiday coming up in 2 weeks, that's day after Christmas, we will not be having an episode the day after Christmas. I don't want my family to kill me. So it'll probably be on the 2nd or the 9th, and you'll get an email notification of that coming up. Or you can watch for our events page at washingtonpolicy.org. And don't forget, hey, everybody's mind's on the holiday, but at washingtonpolicy.org, our research center directors are still updating with some really compelling material, even now. So be watchful of that and be sure to share it when you get a chance. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is David Bose. I'm the Communications and Marketing Director for Washington Policy on the Go. We'll see you next time.